You know what it is. That's right. It's time to talk money with your money nerd and financial coach. Now, tighten those purse strings and open those ears. It's the Money Talk with Tiff podcast.
Hey everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Money Talk with Tiff podcast. Today I have Nicki Conradt-Eberlin on the line. Now, if you hang out with Nicki for too long, she'll brainwash you into believing you can do anything. She is a life coach with a passion for helping individuals reach their goals through building habits of discipline, consistency, focus, and accountability. Her results-oriented coaching provides individuals the commitment to selfishly focus on themselves during their sessions. Nicki helps her overwhelmed clients by keeping things simple to create more results, not make things more complicated, because that is what we need in our lives. Thank you so much, Nicki, for coming on the show today.
Heck yeah, you're so welcome. I'm happy to be here.
Thank you. So I just want to hop right in because I want to talk about pretty much your journey and how you got to this space. So I guess let's start with, how did you get started on this, journey to being a life coach? And then what kind of struggles did you encounter?
Yeah, so previously, before I became a life coach full-time, I worked in the quote-unquote corporate world, of course, and I had worked with the company for 15 years. I actually started with them, well over 15 years. I started with them when I was in high school, and I slowly worked up that corporate ladder. I went to college, I came back, and my last position there was a training manager. And as a training manager, I helped with new employee development or onboarding. I helped with just general employee professional and personal development. And then I did some leadership coaching. But that last position that I was in as a training manager actually really opened my eyes to coaching. I've always been someone that was really focused on personal development for myself. And I was naturally doing coaching, but not actually knowing that I was actually doing it, quote unquote. And then I realized there's an entire industry out there just for coaches. And I knew I always wanted to be a business owner or high in the leadership aspect of a company, but I never really knew how. And it actually, the month of March when COVID hit is when I was like, you know what? I think I can actually do this. I can, we're in lockdown, so there's nothing better to do. Might as well start building a business and have fun with it. So that's when I started transitioning into life coaching and doing it kind of part-time while I was working full-time. And then eventually built a game plan for myself to transition into my business full-time. So I have been full-time in my business since July of 2021, and it has been a journey.
Now, okay, so I want to backtrack a little bit. So let's go back to when you were working full-time and working on this part-time, because I tell people that's the best way to build your business. Use other people's money to fund your passion until it can self-sustain. So what type of strategies did you use, money-wise, in order to make going full-time a reality?
Yeah, so I had to do some hard looks at my finances, and it really just started with making sure I created a sustainable budget. And of course, I had a budget before, but the budget was different because I had a different goal in mind. My goal was to fund my business so then I could leave that job and get into it full time. So I had to end up cutting expenses, things that weren't necessary, for example, Netflix. I know that's probably a tough conversation for some people, but cutting things out and realizing that this amount of money that I need needs to be funded for my business so I can grow and have a bigger return later on in the future. So that was, I think, the first thing that started that journey right there.
Yeah. And, that's something I talk about a lot on the podcast too, budgeting. So I'm glad that you brought that up, because I feel like it's really hard to make it to your financial goals, especially if you're trying to quit corporate without a budget, because you have to know what you're aiming at. How much does your business need to make in order for you to sustain? Now, what other things, as far as mindset is concerned, because I know when I was going through the whole going from corporate to entrepreneurship, I had it in my mind, of course, the whole money thing, having my budget, knowing my numbers. And then also I was just I can do this. Like, this is something that is completely possible. But everybody, like all of my coworkers, everybody was more scared for me than I was for me. So how did you get through like the whole mindset thing?
Yeah. So everybody's journey is 100% different. So like I had the money part on point with my budget, but I was kind of like a closet life coach. Like I was still embarrassed. I wouldn't say embarrassed. I still didn't have the confidence like to say like I'm a business owner. Like, you know, anybody could say that, but going out there and telling your friends that you're leaving your comfort corporate job that you've been at for over 15 years to start entrepreneurship is a little unsettling. And I felt the pressure from people. So I think that when I transitioned into my life coaching full time, that's where really I had to focus on instilling belief in myself and the confidence that I can do these things. So like in the grand scheme of things, I knew that I could be successful, but it was like making sure that I had the confidence in the day-to-day work, like showing up on video or doing these things that make you be a life coach or that make you be the certain person that you want to be, who your higher self is, right? So I really had to focus on that mental aspect, the belief, the confidence once I left, because then I feel like I didn't have an identity. I was attached to this company that I've been with for so long, and now I'm an entrepreneur in my own company, and I'm like, who do I want to be? You know, it was kind of like an identity crisis.
Yes, and I'm so glad you mentioned that as well, because a lot of people's life is tied up in their identity. Like you said, it's tied up into what they do for a living. Because, you know, we place so much emphasis on how much do you make? What do you do? Like when you go to networking events, usually the first question is, oh, what do you do? You know, that type of thing. So we place so much emphasis on that. So when you're at a position for 15 plus years, it's like, this is who I am. So now you have to break out of that comfort zone and break out of that shell and do something completely different. Well, in your case, it wasn't completely, but you know, you have to do something a little different. And I love that you go over that, because that is something that holds a lot of people back from pursuing their passions. It's just like, okay, this is scary, first of all. And then second of all, this is who I am. So let's get into, now that you've made the transition to entrepreneurship, what type of struggles, you know, both money, mentally, what have you gone through? And what are some tips you can potentially give the audience to get through those humps?
Yeah, I would say a big one that immediately comes to my mind is the inconsistency of income in my business right now. And that's completely normal. Like, it's not a big deal. That's how businesses operate. But you don't just naturally get a paycheck every 2 weeks like you did before. So really understanding how money comes in and how to make sure that I'm spending it appropriately in my business, but also paying myself so I can pay my bills and still thrive and still have money to have fun, that sort of stuff. So really kind of, I had to completely change my budget and scrap everything when I went into my business full time, because that was business money, quote unquote. It wasn't just my money just to do whatever I wanted with. So I had to kind of play around with that differently.
Mm-hmm. And I also want to mention some expenses that people do not think about is like health expenses. Yeah. When you work for a job, you're part of their health plan or what have you. But when you're out here as an entrepreneur, it looks completely different.
Yeah. And that was definitely like health insurance, vision, dental, retirement. All that stuff is stuff that I kind of had to look at before I transitioned and figure out what's the best option for me and how can I still provide myself these benefits as an entrepreneur. Because you still totally can. Just because you go into entrepreneurship doesn't mean that you don't get health insurance or you don't get a qualified retirement. It's just going to look different.
Mm-hmm. And one thing to mention too, since we're on the topic of retirement, when you're an entrepreneur, you have like this smorgasbord of options.
Yeah.
Like you can pretty much pick whatever plan you want to create and start, putting money into it. So that is a good thing with being an entrepreneur. You can pick whatever type of plan, whether it's a simple IRA, a SEP IRA, traditional 401k. There's so many different options.
Yep.
So I'm glad you mentioned that as well. Now, I do want to ask, though, because you mentioned that you pay yourself, right? And I know just from questions that I get all the time, how do I pay myself as an entrepreneur? So how do you pay yourself as an entrepreneur? Like, do you have a set amount that you take from your business every so often? Is it a certain percentage? What does that look like for you?
Yeah, right now I pay myself on a monthly basis, and it's a specific amount. So I've allotted in that budget to pay all my personal bills, but also include fun money in there because I deserve to still have fun. That doesn't mean I have to limit myself being a business owner. And that's what's worked best for me right now. I think this upcoming year will provide different changes where maybe I will start doing more of a percentage. But I have to make sure at the bare minimum that my business expenses get paid and my personal expenses get paid.
Yes. So if you all want to take Nicki's route, and please correct me if I'm wrong, you have to have a personal budget first.
Yep.
So that way you know how much you need to survive. And then she's just paying herself that amount, whatever her budget says to pay her, every month from her business. And that's how she's making it work. So thank you so much for sharing that information with us. Now, if people were interested in learning more about you, getting in touch with you, how can they find you?
Yeah, so you can get in touch with me through all the usual social media outlets. So on Facebook and Instagram, my handle is Unleashed Leadership. You can find me on LinkedIn through my name, Nicki Conradt-Eberlin. I also have a website, unleashedleadership.com. And those are those main areas of where you can find me.
Okay, perfect. And if you didn't catch all of that, I will, like always, have it in the show notes. So you can definitely check that out. And I'll have all her links so you can connect with her. So thank you so much, Nicki, for coming on the show today.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you for listening, joining, and being a part of the Money Talk with Tiff podcast this week. You can check Tiff out every Thursday for a new Money Talk podcast. But if you just can't wait until next week, you can listen to previous podcast episodes at moneytalkwitht.com or follow Tiff on all social media platforms at Money Talk with T. Until next time, spend wise by spending less than you make. A word to the money wise is always sufficient.